And here's something for the little ones. This will be a challenge. Do you think it'll keep them a little bit focused? I want to read you this story. Story is called Jesus' Christmas Party. There was nothing the innkeeper liked more than a good night's sleep. But that night there was a knock on the door. "No room," said the innkeeper. "Oh, but we're tired, and we've travelled through the night and the day. There's only a stable round the back. Here's 2 blankets. Sign the register." So they signed it, Mary and Joseph. Then the innkeeper shut the door, climbed the stairs, got into bed, and went back to sleep. But then later on there was another knock on the door. "Excuse me, I wonder if you could lend us another blanket." "There, 1 small blanket," said the innkeeper. Then the innkeeper shut the door, climbed the stairs, got into bed, and went back to sleep. But then a bright light woke him up. "That's all I need," said the innkeeper. Then he shut the door, climbed the stairs, drew the curtains, got into bed, and went to sleep. But then there was another knock on the door. "We are 3 shepherds. Well, what's the matter? Have you lost your sheep?" "We have come to see Mary and Joseph." "Round the back," said the innkeeper. Then he shut the door, climbed the stairs, got into bed, and went to sleep. But then there was another knock on the door. "We are 3 kings. We've come. Round the back." Then the innkeeper, he slammed the door, climbed the stairs, got into bed, and went to sleep. But then a chorus of singing woke him up. "Right, that does it." So he got out of bed, stomped down the stairs, threw open the door, went round the back, stormed into the stable, and was just about to speak when, "Shh, shh," whispered everyone. "You'll wake the baby." "Baby?" the innkeeper said. "Yes, a baby has been born tonight." "Oh," said the innkeeper, looking crossly into the manger. And just at that moment, suddenly, amazingly, the innkeeper's anger seemed to fly away. In fact, he thought it was so special, he woke all of the guests in the inn so that they could come and look at the baby too. So nobody got much sleep that night. The end. Great story, isn't it? Interruptions are a pain, aren't they? If you're a dad watching the rugby, do you like interruptions? If you're a mum with a long, luxurious bath, do you like interruptions? If you're a lad in a computer game, do you like interruptions? What about if you're a bookworm and you're right in the good part of that book? Do you like interruptions? What if you're an innkeeper who's trying to get some sleep? He certainly doesn't like interruptions. However, some interruptions are really helpful. Years ago, when I was a science teacher at a Catholic school, I remember waxing eloquently about the properties of water. So you're going to get a small science lesson to set the scene for this interruption. In those days, I could draw amazing pictures on the whiteboard that had my students captivated. I think I've lost my touch. So I was explaining that when water gets close to freezing, it freezes, it expands. And because it is now solid ice and lighter than the liquid water, it floats to the top and forms this insulating layer over the lake. And that means the water underneath never freezes and the aquatic life can survive. Pretty clever, isn't it? Because if it was like oil, it would just freeze solid and everything would die. So I was waxing eloquently about this, and then the brightest lad who went on to be Dux, and this was about year 11, I think, put his hands up. I thought, here's a go. He said, "Mr. Bradley, how can you teach science and be a Christian?" Random, which is typical teenager, and an interruption. So like I said, I was at a Catholic school, and we used to start the morning with devotions, and he was in my form class, so he knew I was a Christian. And somewhere along the track, he's got it as in mind that science had disproved God. So in his mind, there was this conflict about how good science could be coming from a teacher who was a Christian. So I spent a few minutes just briefly explaining that it's quite possible to be a believer in God and a scientist. And then afterwards I had a longer chat to him. Was that a good interruption? Or was that a bad interruption? It was certainly an interesting interruption, especially since I can remember it 25 years later. Another interruption, while carrying on the science for the theme, you may know the story of Alexander Fleming. And he was a scientist working on diseases in the 20s, and he had a science lab, and he was incubating bacteria that caused diseases in humans. And he was testing samples to see if he could find something to treat bacterial diseases. Anyway, he had a scheduled holiday that he'd set ages ago, and he was in the middle of his work, and it was a major interruption, but he had a wife, and he knew better. So he went on holiday. And when he'd come back, he'd left some petri dishes incubating, and they'd got contaminated with some mold, and his experiment was ruined, and he was about to throw them out. But when he looked at them, he'd noticed that where the mold had fallen, the bacteria had refused to grow. The mold had inhibited the bacteria. So he spent some time working out and found out the mold was penicillium. That was the mold. And you know where this is going, don't you? Because he then isolated penicillin, which was the first antibiotic which saved millions and millions of lives over the years. So was his holiday a good interruption or a bad interruption? Interesting, isn't it? Now, Jesus is the master of the interruptions, not just for innkeeper. Jesus is the master of interruptions in all sorts of ways, and I briefly want to look at 3 ways that Jesus interrupts. And the first way is time itself. Time is interrupted by Jesus because we measure our years in BC, before Christ, and AD, which is Latin, in the year of our Lord. Jesus was so significant in human history that he interrupted time. So 1 AD, 1 in the year of our Lord, was when Jesus was born. And now we're 2025 years after Jesus' birth. Jesus interrupts time itself. Then Jesus grew up and became the master of interruption. He interrupted people's lives. There were 4 fishermen mending their nets, and he interrupted them. Said, "Come follow me." Then there was a tax collector extracting taxes, making lots of money. Jesus interrupted him and said, "Come follow me." And then we have Paul on the Damascus Road minding his own business, and Jesus interrupted him in a major way, if you know the story. "Come follow me." And Jesus still interrupts our lives today with an invitation to come to him. Matthew 11:28, Jesus said, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble of heart, and you will find rest for your souls." It's a lovely invitation, isn't it? Especially in the chaotic lives, maybe the chaotic week we've just had. Isn't it lovely to know that Jesus invites us to himself to have rest? So Jesus interrupts time, Jesus interrupts our lives, and final interruption I want to look at briefly is that Jesus came to interrupt death itself. Because on that first Good Friday, Jesus was nailed to the cross and he died a most horrible of death. And then placed in the tomb, he should have stayed dead. But he didn't. For Jesus interrupted death itself, and on the 3rd day he was raised to die no more. And here's the thing, Jesus' interrupting death was not just for himself, but it's for all those who follow him. Good friends of him, Mary and Martha, they lost their brother, and Jesus came to comfort them. And to Martha, who was grieving, and say, "Why, Lord? Why did my brother die?" Jesus said, "I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live, even though he dies." Jesus is the great interrupter. He interrupts time, he interrupts our lives, he came to interrupt death itself. And this is where the interrupted night that the innkeeper had, this is where all of this leads us, because the cross catapults us to the cross and the empty tomb. And Jesus still interrupts today and offers each one of us the invitation to come and follow him. This is the good news of the gospel, and this is why the innkeeper woke everyone up to come and see the baby Jesus. Let's pray.